most people have an idea that Jesus was a person who existed, and he was either a madman, a liar, or the question that everyone fears is the Son of God, right?
I think he was a radical social progressive. That's what I think.
Well, for Jesus to say these things, one of these things would have to be true, right?
Or or other things.
Well, how would we even know that he said things like, I am the Son of God, me and my Father are one, and I am.
We have really no way of verifying it.
So you're basically saying either Jesus said these things or someone invented him and the things that he said, right?
Yeah, and because all of the records of him are from long after he died. Excuse me.
Okay, so
And because a lot of the accounts are not exactly I don't know if there are really any contradictions about Jesus himself. You can argue the when was he crucified? There's a couple different things there, and a few other things. Matthew also gets a prophecy dead wrong, but that's not really exactly an that doesn't really say anything about Jesus necessarily. I forgot what I was even saying. Go ahead.
So, either, Jesus did say these things or someone invented them. So we have to ask ourselves four questions. Who made them up? When? Why? And what did they gain from them? So Peter Kreeft, you know, author of 80 different books about the subject, said that these people who made them up would have gained ostracized by their family and friends. They would have lost social standings and possessions to the Jews and the Romans of the time, tortured, imprisoned, executed, crucified, eaten by lions, cut to death by gladiators. Now, that's not something that you or I would want to make up about this kind of thing. So if, you know, let's suppose that Jesus did exist and he was crucified, because the only two historical evidence about Jesus that we have today are his crucifixion and his baptism. So if he was being misunderstood or a legend, you got to ask yourself that if you were on trial for your life because of some big misunderstanding, wouldn't you want to do everything to clear it up? Except, Jesus, he doubled and then tripled down on it, saying that he is the Son of God.
People decades after he died said that. Yeah. I mean, John is really the only place where he says that, and that's the latest gospel. And when was the Gospel of John written? Let's get a good timeline.
Around 50 to
It's
60
believed to have
years.
been written around between 90 and 110. Oh, that's not as late as I thought. I thought it would be later than that. So,
Right. So these 12 people, his 12 disciples, actually lived and died for their faith. Now, people live and die,
we
based off
don't
things
know
that they
that.
believe. Um, Except we have written proof about this. The Pauline
Only
letters were
two of
written
the
in,
apostles' deaths are talked about, I believe.
all 12 are mentioned. A few of them
In the
didn't
Bible?
die for a few of them didn't die for their faith. I think only two of them lived a full life. The other ones were crucified. Another one was skinned to death, beheaded, stoned to death, across the streets.
James, son of Zebedee, is the only one in the Bible whose death is actually talked about. Peter is traditionally said to have been crucified upside down, yes, but that's not in the Bible. And one of them was crucified on like an X-shaped cross, I believe, but that's not in the Bible. Right. So,
Okay, so my question to you is that if it is a legend, we have to look at the historical evidence and see that a legend of that size could not grow in such a short amount of time. The earliest signs of Christianity that we have,
you
it,
don't
it
even
dates
believe
back to
that.
60 AD. I'm sorry?
You don't even believe that.
Oh, I do.
Far greater numbers of people today believe in stuff that we know is total nonsense. There's like 30 million people in America that think that Donald Trump won the election.
Well,
30 million. they couldn't possibly have numbers so great if it wasn't true, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about two different things. We're talking about something that people believed in and would be executed for without denying their faith. That's not something that you can just
Well, I
give
wouldn't
up.
say that all 30 million of them would go that far, but I bet some Brent Peterson. Sorry, comment section got me.
So again, these people lived and died. Every single mainstream historian believes that Jesus was a real person. Now, if we can agree that he was a real person, we still have to, answer those questions of, why, people would make up a legend this big just to die for it for no particular reason. Would you die knowing that something that you made up?
Well, that's complete. Like so you're asserting that they did know it, or sorry, you're basically saying why would somebody die for something they know isn't true, which is a really unfair question because that's not at all my position. People can believe in something that's not true with that much conviction.
But knowing something that you made up.
Yeah, so you're asking me why would somebody know that something is made up and believe in it on threat of death as if that's what I think, and that's not what I think.
So are you denying that these people died for something that they knew was made up?
Why do you keep saying this? I never claimed that they knew it was false and believed in it under threat of death anyway. That's so insane, and it's a complete straw man of my position. I said that people can believe in something that doesn't happen to be true, but they believe it. And you
Right.
can believe in something with that much conviction.
I'm referring to the 12 disciples.
Right. Of which we know nothing about how they died except for stuff that was written down decades after they would have died. Well, no, there's literally just tradition that's been passed down. Shit, what was I going to say? I forgot. People that, well, nah, never mind.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, people that believe in other religions have been, for example, the Native Americans in South Central and North America, conquistadors came over here and they threatened for them to convert or die, and many of them refused to, and so they accepted death. And I was going to say that doesn't prove that their God is real, but you're talking about people that supposedly actually saw these things happen. So it wasn't a super fair comparison, I felt like, so that's why I said never mind. And then I burped, but there it is anyways.
Well, again, these people, it isn't just a small group of people. It isn't just the 12 disciples. You got to look back at the miracles that he claimed to have done, feasting over 1,000 people. That's not something that you can just make up in a small amount of time that people would live and die for. For legend that large to grow, it would have to be over 100 years of this legend to be existing and floating around. Because, you're going to have people who can be there and say, none of this happened, this didn't happen, this person never existed.
Not everybody that heard these stories ever met Jesus. They just heard the stories, and they would have been among the people persecuted. And you're saying, how can they believe in something but a lot of these people weren't witness to it. So again, just because they believe it doesn't make it true. They just believe it.
Okay, then let's talk about the empty tomb. How can you explain that, Jesus did not rise from the tomb?
We don't know that that's the case. In fact, the idea that he would have even been given a tomb is historically absurd. Rome never gave anybody that was crucified a tomb. They left him out on the cross to be picked apart by birds. And yeah, the Bible claims differently, but like it has to weave the story that they're trying to tell. but it flies in the face of anything that we know about Roman crucifixions.
Okay, so let's suppose that he isn't in the tomb, and let's also suppose that he was buried in the tomb. Why wouldn't the Romans just come out and say, no, this is Jesus' body. He's still here. He did not rise from the dead.
Say that again. Why did, if he didn't rise, why did Rome not say blah, 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 blah?
Yeah, why would they not come out and say, your God is a lie. Jesus is not the Son of God. We have his body right over here.
Right. So the best explanation is he never had a tomb in the first place.
Yeah, but I'm also
So
going with this.
there's no body for them to say, oh, it's here, still here in the tomb. Like the idea that he would have ever been given it. You're assuming that the Bible is true in the first place. That particular detail in the story is true in the first place. And then you're saying, well, if it's not true that he didn't resurrect, assuming this other thing is true, why didn't they just show his body?
Well, we have biblical evidence and we have non-Christian evidence supporting that Jesus lived and died.
I don't doubt that he existed, yeah.
Right.
We don't have any contemporary accounts, though.
I mean, you can go back to the writings of Josephus and Tacitus from 93 to 94 AD, talking about the persecution of the Jews and Christians.
That would be like me talking about when Led Zeppelin 1 came out in 1968 or whenever that was.
Well, if you want to go with that argument, I mean, I can say the same thing of the earliest accounts of Christianity and it being formed as a religion dated back to around 64 AD. That's the exact same thing as me saying that in 1993, a guy named Joseph Atticus raised a guy from dead from the prom.
That's like 40 years after Jesus died, though.
You're right. But
so somebody that spoke a completely different language than Jesus wrote down a story 40 years after he died, and we can say that counts as evidence.
I mean,
but it sounds like terrible evidence.
40 years isn't a very long amount of time once you think about it.
It's a huge amount of time to have an entire series of events take place to then be written down in a completely different language.
The point that I'm trying to make,
stuff gets wrong in the media today in this country. They get stuff wrong literally all the time. Now, sometimes they're just acting as propagandists, obviously, but they don't mean to get all kinds of things wrong, but they do, and there isn't even a language barrier, and it's all happening in real time. You're talking about 40 years in a different language.
I'm talking about 40 years as in the time of, somebody still being alive to say that that Jesus never did these things. 40 years, okay? Someone can still be alive from 40 years ago who can say these things didn't happen.
Oh, sure. I mean, you can say that you believe that the apostles told whoever wrote the Gospels in Greek what happened, but there's no evidence of that.
You're right. I mean, when it comes to historical evidence, when it comes to the actual Bible, there isn't a lot of evidence dating to close to the time of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection. However, there's still a ton of questions that are left unanswered that, you just can't.
But all of your questions assume that the Gospels are true to begin with. All the ones I've heard so far, at least.